In this video, I'm going to help you address the most common cognitive distortion. I'm going to help you think about how you think so that you improve how you feel and react to challenging situations. Stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with John. I'm John Peters, and these are resources to help you thrive. So this is part 2 of my Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy series. If you want to watch part 1, I'll put a link up here. Feel free to go watch that one, but you can proceed with this one and go watch that one later if you want. But in this video, I'm going to talk about what in the 1980s and 1990s was called masturbating or shoulding on yourself, which is 1980s humor. Pardon the offense if you don't like those terms, but it'll make sense here when you understand the concept. But there's a cognitive distortion that is very common. You do it, I do it, we do it every day. And sometimes it is part of what trips us up in terms of how we're perceiving and reacting to situations. And in this video, I'm going to teach you how to become more aware of that in order to reduce the negative influence of this cognitive distortion when it shows up. Okay. So Albert Ellis was the author who promoted rational emotive behavioral therapy. And just as a quick review of a core part of REBT theory is that we have adversity or activating events, the A. We have B, which connects to the C. I'll come back to B in a second. But the C is the consequences, how we feel about things, what we think about things, what we behaviorally do in response to what we experienced with the adversity, okay? And the reason we skipped B and then we come back to it after getting to C is that we have the A, like I have a flat tire on my car. The consequences, I get frustrated and angry about it. The reason that that A is connected to that C is because of the B that occurs in between. And the B is belief. So Ellis, when he was talking about REBT, said that we don't have control over A. We don't really have full control over C. We have some influence over that. But we have a lot of control over the B if we actually take a look at it. So if my belief is, I'm going to be late to work and my boss is going to be mad at me. Okay, those are the beliefs that occur when the flat tire is perceived. Okay, then logically, that A with that B will lead to the C of being anxious, frustrated, whatever happens that's congruent and coherent with the beliefs that get fired off when I experience that particular activating event. Okay, that's why it's an ABC model and why we're most aware of what the A is, we're most aware of what the C is, but we have to kind of dig a little deeper to figure out what the specific B is that's in play in a particular situation that connects the dots between the A and the C, okay? So when we take a look at our beliefs in cognitive behavioral therapy, a very common analysis is to look for cognitive distortions, okay? Cognitive distortions mean cognitions that are skewed in some way. There's a spin on the cognition so that it is leading to a suboptimal subsequent perception or feeling or reaction, okay? So basically, if you're watching this video, if you care about cognitive behavioral therapy, if you care about therapy at all, part of what you're interested in is not feeling miserable, but feeling better more of the time. And you're also probably interested in coping more effectively with challenging situations as opposed to poorly coping with poorer outcomes, okay? And for Ellis, because that's our project all day, every day, basically, for Ellis, he thought that if we want to have the most efficient changes in our life in order to cope more effectively with things and have more satisfying feelings and emotions in response to things, then we can examine our beliefs, we can examine our cognitions. And an important aspect of that process of working with our cognitions is looking for cognitive distortions, okay? So I'll talk about cognitive distortions more broadly in another video, but for Ellis, there are different types of cognitive distortions, but basically the most common type is what he called masturbating, and what Joan Borisenko, who is a contemporary writer at the time of Ellis's work, called shoulding. And so basically, we should on ourselves when we think something must be this way or that way, okay? So there are different types of cognitive distortions, and this should type comprises arguably the most common thing that you and I do when we are distorting something in our perception that leads to bad feelings and suboptimal reactions to challenging situations, okay? And for Ellis, there were three types of musts, okay? So he called it masturbating. I'm going to call it shoulding on yourself in this video. But Ellis thought that we have these common distortions that are around this must concept. And one version is, you must treat me a certain way. So if I get triggered by something where the activating event has to do with someone else doing something that I'm perceiving, often in my head, I've got one or more ideas that basically say, you must do that a certain way. You must treat me a certain way, or you must treat me, or you must not treat me a certain way, right? And so what the person is doing is a violation of my cognitive belief that you must or do something or must not do something a certain way, okay? The second type of must is, I must perform a certain way. So perfectionism is an easy way to think about that. When someone is a perfectionist, they think, I must have this essay absolutely perfect with every word, every sentence, every phrase, the most perfect thing I can muster. So we have musts that we assign to ourselves as well. I must do certain things certain ways, or I must not do certain things certain ways, okay? And then the third type is, the universe must behave a certain way. So let's say I plan a picnic and I walk out the door and I look up and rain clouds are starting to open up to pour down rain on my picnic. And I get mad about that. Why am I mad? Because I've got this idea, it must not rain on my picnic, okay? So you must behave a certain way, I must behave a certain way, the universe must behave a certain way. So those are the three types of musts or shoulds that Ellis said are very common types of cognitive distortions that lead to the C of the ABC model that we don't like, meaning feelings that that are miserable in tone, or behavioral reactions that are suboptimal, that aren't effective coping, or are destructive to us or others, okay? So let me pause for a second and just talk about the distortion part of cognitive distortion. We're not necessarily saying that we walk around all day thinking that everything we think is wrong, okay, and everything we think is a cognitive distortion. And it's also not necessarily true that every single instance of having some displeasure, some misery, some sort of suboptimal reaction is necessarily an instance of some sort of egregious cognitive distortion, right? It's not that we have to completely falsify the validity of all of our perceptions or our beliefs about things, or the things that we're ascribing onto reality. It's not like we're living in an ultimately plastic matrix like in the movie, but you can't just uncritically, this is Ellis's position, you can't just uncritically accept everything you think, right? I used to have a bumper sticker on my car that said, don't believe everything you think, which was a reminder to just question things at times. And the best time to question what you're thinking is if what you're feeling is quite miserable, or if your reaction is negative and suboptimal, okay? That's a really good time to take a look at, am I having beliefs in play that are leading me to negative feelings and negative reactions that I might want to rework? And why would I want to rework them? Because potentially I've got some sort of cognitive distortion in terms of how I'm thinking about it. And I might be able to rework that in order to have a better type of way to think about the situation, so that I'm less miserable and I have a better outcome in terms of how I'm responding to and coping with the adversity, okay? So again, the topic of this video is on the musts or the shoulds, because this is a very common thing. And you can kind of approach this in two ways. Sometimes when patients come to therapists like me and they're dealing with a really challenging situation, we kind of laser focus on the specific situation, the specific type of trigger, if it's a recurring trigger, and we try to unpack the beliefs that are associated with how the person's perceiving and reacting to it in order to identify the specific musts or shoulds or other types of cognitive distortions that exist. And that is one way to do it, the laser focus of saying, there's a particularly big situation in my life. I don't like how I feel about it. I don't like how I'm reacting to it. So one of the ways I want to work with it is to take a look at what am I thinking about it? And especially, how do I think about it in those moments where I'm most affected by the trigger? I'm going up to code orange or code red in my stress response related to that particular trigger. So the strategy for that is just soon after you get really triggered by an event like that, sit down with a journal and just write everything you think you're thinking about it at the time that you're most triggered. And you're likely to find cognitive distortions there, and you're likely to find different, maybe one or more musts or shoulds. And then what's the next step? For Ellis, it's the D of the ABCDE model. D stands for dispute. And you end up saying, can I argue with myself so that I argue myself into a different set of beliefs about that situation? Therefore, I'm going to have a different C, different set of feelings and reactions that potentially are more satisfying, okay? So that's kind of, again, REBT strategy, which is identify the B and then dispute it so that you change the B, which means that same A will lead to a different C, okay? The same adversity, different beliefs will lead to a different set of feelings and reactions to it. But here's the gentler strategy, and here's one that I recommend you try, and if you're willing, try this experiment. This is a little gentler than trying to tackle your biggest stressor in your life. And it actually will support you when you do try to work on the more consequential things that you're wanting to improve your reactions to. And it goes like this. So what you do is you start to just train your brain to notice your shoulds. And because you and I do this every day, literally every day, we do this. Anytime we're frustrated, there is some sort of should in operation in our head. We may not think of it consciously that way, like it should not be cloudy right now, but we walk outside and we kind of grumble, I don't like the weather, okay? Well, if I'm feeling any activation, so what I'm talking about here is code yellow level activation into mild code orange activation. So I'm not talking about the big code red moments of your week. I'm just saying that every single day, we all have blips where we get at least mildly frustrated, okay? So if you're doing this gentler version of my experiment that I'm describing here, what you do is you just notice when I am mildly frustrated. So when my stress level goes up to a 3, 4, 5, I'm going to just turn my attention to my thoughts and just, if I can, identify what should is operating in that moment, okay? So if I'm stopped at a train crossing while trying to get to an appointment, and then I feel frustrated because I don't make it through the intersection and the arm comes down and I have to stop, and then I get upset. Okay, I notice that I'm upset. I'm not over the top upset, but I'm kind of upset. So what should is in operation? That train shouldn't have been here. Okay, again, the universe should not be acting this way, right? So basically what you do is you don't have to do this all day, every day, but just some of the time when you have a relatively mild stress reaction, which again, mostly we're talking about code yellow level stress reaction here. Some of the time, what you do is just take 3 seconds and just identify the should. What should is in play here? And the reason that this helps people improve their perceptions and reactions in general, if you do this gentle exercise, is that naturally, when we make explicit and conscious the shoulds that are in play at the time that we're having a stress reaction, we are smart, creative people. You are a smart, creative person. Your brain will naturally start to rework some of those shoulds. And what that's going to do is over time, you examine some of those shoulds and you smooth them out and you start to chill out basically and weaken the strength of the should. Because let's say I get upset at the train and I'm all fused with that experience. Rather than taking an objective look at it, I'm just going to sit there and be mad about it, okay? But if I notice that I have some elevated stress and I say, what am I mad about? Why am I mad? Okay, this train shouldn't have been here. And then that would lead me naturally, at least some of the time, to say something like, okay, I'm trying to think that the train system is supposed to somehow be attuned to my travel so that trains never get in front of me. That's kind of a little bit of a distortion, right? To have that expectation. And because I then see that as a distortion, it's an unreasonable expectation on the universe, I naturally will let go of it to some degree. Okay. Maybe I'm still frustrated because I wish the train wouldn't have been there, but then I'm turning it into a preference rather than a should. I would prefer that trains not get in front of me. Okay. But if I have that belief, I prefer that trains not get in front of me, I'm probably not going to get all flipped out, at least not as flipped out as I would if the thought that was in play is trains should not be in front of me. They just shouldn't do it with a capital S, okay? So examine your shoulds. What will naturally happen is that you will soften some of those, and that will lead to more positive emotion, and it will lead to less stress and more effective coping, okay? So I hope you found this beneficial. And by the way, a really good book, Ellis wrote several books in his career, but a really good book is How to Keep People from Pushing Your Buttons. He wrote it back in like 1995, but it's still actually, I think, a really good self-help read. He lays it out in very understandable terms so that even a total layperson can understand the concepts of REBT and how to work with Ellis's suggestions of how to improve your perceptions and reactions to things. So I'll put a link for that down in the description if you want to go check out that book. And by the way, when I put links to things in my descriptions, they often are affiliate links to like Amazon affiliate programs, but you don't pay any extra if you click on the link and buy the book. It does help me in this channel a little bit if you do that, but up to you. You can get the book at your library if you want as well. So anyway, if you like this kind of content, feel very free to hit the like button below. If you have a comment about this video or any other, feel free to leave comments because it helps me get good feedback that teaches me the type of content that people like to see on the channel. And if you have yet to subscribe, I highly recommend that you subscribe because subscriptions also help support this channel. So I will see you in a future video. Thanks for joining me today.